I was your age, Whitman, I thought tomorrow would never come. Well, now I'm old, and I wonder where tomorrow went. You don't understand that right now, and there's a lot more about the story I'm going to tell you that you won't understand until you're a little older. But it's an important part of you and your own story. You see, Whitman, you're not all there is to you. I'm your grandfather, but I'm part of you. And so is your father, and my grandfather, and all the mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers. They're all part of you. You are what they were, plus what you make the effort to become. You young people are just the latest, the newest, and hopefully the best and most improved model of us old folks. That doesn't mean you're locked into our mold and are not free to make your own life. It simply means that you have a long head start over the caveman, who also helped you get where you are. You're starting from on top of all our shoulders. You see, Whitman, time actually runs backward as well as forward. The past is inseparable from the present and the future. I'll give you an example. This picture is flying toward the future. Now watch it. Slow down and stand still in the present. And then, magic presto, it runs backward. And behold, the past is still there. Your grandfather, when he was your age, and his grandfather, when he was my age. History is a story and study of causes and effects, strung on a thread of time. But most of us fail the course miserably, because often the thread is so long that we don't connect the effects with our actual causes. But when we do, we can use the past as a foundation to build the future and live many lives in addition to our own. We share each other's successes and failures, which really are all mankind's successes and failures. We have to learn to stand aside and watch ourselves go by and laugh along with everybody else. We then discover there's much more to life than just our little selves. I'm going to try to tell you what I know about where you came from. So look and listen hard, and I hope all this helps you to learn to love this fantastic world and somehow make it better for everyone in it. Since all mankind are your ancestors, I can't tell you about everybody, but I can go back to a well-known starting point, a man with your same name of Fulton, Robert Fulton. He was a portrait painter turned inventor when he went to England, saw an early steam engine, and designed both a steamboat and submarine. Back in America, he built the first commercially successful steamship. On water, it was equivalent to the invention of the wheel. It was the first major breakthrough since the discovery of sailing and shrank the size of the Earth from months to days. And only a few moments ago, you saw your great-great-grandfather by the name of Travis. When he died in 1917, the newspapers described him as the last of the Old West pioneers. He was a wonderful horseman, and even as a soldier boy of 15 in the Civil War, he was his general's courier, riding at a dead run through enemy lines, hanging onto the belly of his horse. After the war, he went west with covered wagons and eventually built the Utah, Nevada, and California Stagecoach Company. It was wild country then, full of deserts and desperados and danger. Distances were enormous, roads non-existent, and much of the law of the land was six-shooter. He raised his own horses by the tens of thousands, and his stages carried mail and passengers over 4,000 miles a day. I remember him as a man who loved the challenge of life, especially on a wild horse. Look at that proud figure on that magnificent animal. To me, he's a picture of what every grandfather should be to every grandchild. And it didn't all stop there. his oldest son, Elgin, took the next step from the stagecoach to the motor bus. He started in California with funny cars that he stretched and finally drove all the way across the continent to become involved in what is now the biggest bus system in the world, the Greyhound system. It seems transportation runs in our blood. My father, too, was involved in such primitive cars. In the early 1900s, he made many trips to Europe, hired Frenchmen to drive Mercedes cars from Stuttgart to Cherbourg, brought them to this country, and sold them to Americans for whom he also often raced them. It was thus that he met my mother, an exquisite beauty of the Victorian age, but a woman with the independent spirit of her father's horses. She feared everything in principle, but nothing in fact. With the pioneering background of her father and the adventurous spirit of her husband, she set out to raise a family of 3. Just about everything that America had and still has to offer happened. Riverdale, which is now part of New York City, but was then in the country, was home. We had ducks and goats and lots of cars, a rarity in those days. Motion pictures had barely been invented at that time, but here we are playing at acting. Then came school and summer camps and seashore and even a Wild West horseback trip through Wyoming. My family felt travel was as important a part of education as books. By the time I was 10, we had all been to California, a 5-day and night trip on the fastest trains. And in 1921, in Florida, we pioneered in aviation. In a chartered World War I ex-Navy flying boat, we made the inaugural passenger flight from Miami to Havana. A year later, as president of the Mack Truck Company, my father had to go to Europe, and we were packed along, not to return home for almost 3 years. My sister was left in school in Paris. My brother and I at a wonderful little school called Le Rosé in Switzerland. Easter vacations were spent traveling to Italy and Spain. During summers, we toured Europe from the North Cape to the Riviera. Christmases took us all to Egypt and the Holy Land and the Mediterranean. This was all 60 years ago, yet I remember it as yesterday. Each of these pictures is indelibly filed in my memory bank. Returning to America was like going to still another foreign country. We spoke the language, but we were strangers to the land. We somehow felt excluded and again had to readapt. This sort of upbringing seems the ideal way to create lone wolves. Fancy schools and Harvard College may tend to stamp their names on their students, but our parents didn't leave much room for the stamps. We were given so many opportunities and so much encouragement to think for ourselves that I guess we were spoiled rotten. My father loved the water, so instead of summer homes, we had summer yachts. A different port every night, with a little chance to make friends, but endless opportunity to watch the world go by. My mother thought I should be an architect. My father encouraged the idea to attend the Beaux-Arts and the University of Vienna. When time came to return home, he wrote suggesting I continue the journey eastward, around the world. To see as much architecture as possible, I decided to take a southern route, via Greece, India, Cambodia, and China. And never having ridden a motorcycle, I was sure that where there were no roads, it was the only practical means of transport. So here I am on the way. And if you want to get on here with me, Whitman, we'll catch up and see on film a little of what the world was like in 1932. That was half a century ago, and the world was a very different place from what it is today. Peoples were separated not so much by great distances, but rather by the time it took to traverse those distances. The automobile was barely 30 years old. Commercial air transport didn't exist. Television was undreamed of, and even the radio couldn't cross the language barriers. Colonialism was at its height. The British ruled India. The French controlled Syria and Indochina. The Dutch were in Malaysia, the Americans in the Philippines. The world was just coming to the end of what might be described as a sort of global Middle Ages, where isolation from all but the communal family was the normal way of life. The great philosophic concepts, such as human rights and personal independence, had not yet jumped across the natural barriers of the earth. Even psychology, which plays such an important part in our modern-day personal and international living, was only in its infancy. This journey occurred at the end of an epoch, and its days will never be seen again. Vestiges of it still remain in a few remote corners, but technology, especially in transportation and communication, has changed the world more in the last 50 years than in all the rest of man's time. So many things happened during that year-and-a-half world tour that it's impossible to tell you all of them. And the most important ones were not of a kind that could be recorded on film. I shall therefore leave it to you to do just what I had to do with the original scenes. Decide for yourself what the pictures mean. And don't forget that what you see now will be very different from what you'll see when you're a little older. We see only what we're ready for. But I would like to share with you a few experiences and thoughts which transcend these scenes and better express the striving of mankind to become a superior being, in spite of the confusion which covers and sometimes almost completely hides this effort. I hope that someday all this will help you, not only when you make some such odyssey on your own, but also on that much bigger odyssey, which is your life. I know it's helped me to become what I am, primarily an inventor. I had already crossed Europe, the 500 dusty miles of Turkey, Syria, and another 550 desert miles between Damascus and Baghdad, before my family knew how I was traveling. There I received a cablegram telling me to throw the motorcycle in the Euphrates and take the next steamship for America. Only by means of many more cablegrams did I convince my parents that I had the pioneering blood of my grandfather. And since I had succeeded in getting from London to Baghdad without catastrophe, they finally agreed that I continue on the motorcycle. In the tradition of every He-Man pioneer, I was of course anxious to discover places where no one had ever been. I was sure I found many. But each time I turned over a stone, it said, Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan has been here. What a come down. Actually, I should have been cured of that ego trip early in the journey. On a long road in Macedonia, I'd seen a flashing object far across the shimmering plain. As I approached, I could make out a man carrying an enormous rucksack on which was written, Achtung, Achtung, die Welt rückwärts. As the sign said, here was a fellow with a little rear vision mirror walking around the world backward on his final lap back to Germany. What a piker I was on a motorcycle. I'm afraid to admit that at that time my ego was so inflated that it even stopped me from taking a picture of him. Incidentally, you may wonder how some of these pictures were taken where I ride the motorcycle into the scene. I had a little tripod on which to mount the camera and a small timing mechanism that would delay its start for 10 seconds. I'd set the camera up, go and start the motorcycle engine, then return and start the timer, then run for all I was worth, jump on the machine, and ride it back into the camera. Unfortunately, the ground was often so soft that the vibration of the engine would cause the machine to fall over and stall. By the time I could pick it up and get it running again, the camera would usually have run out of wind, and I'd have to start all over. It was a hot and heavy process. The loaded machine weighed about 600 pounds. Also, I could carry only a limited amount of film, and all film spooling and camera loading had to be done in a special loading bag. Once I put my arms into the 2 elastic sleeves to keep the light out, and the operation was started, there was no opening the bag until the job was finished, or the film would be ruined. That operation caused me all sorts of trouble. Everywhere, those who saw me wanted to know what I was doing. If you think it's hard to talk the sign language, try doing it with your hands locked in a bag. The result was always vast suspicion, even fear, and more than once I got arrested. Finally, one day I saw the light. Loading bags are invariably black. I bought a piece of white cloth and covered it. As easily as that, I was no longer conjuring up the devil. Man's instincts and his emotions seem to have little to do with his geography. I was often asked if I wasn't lonely. Yes, for sure there were moments. But having been away from home so much as a child, I'd already answered that question to myself many times. I long since concluded that for me at least, home was where I was, no matter where that might be. And since every day that came and went would never come again, I was determined to make it the kind of a day I wanted. No matter what happened, I was going to make the most of it. Actually, traveling alone has many advantages. There's a great tendency on the part of all of us to pigeonhole each other. From the moment we're born, we are classified by race, creed, and color. Even in childhood, we are pegged as playful or stubborn or willing or lazy or whatever. And by the time we're old enough to know what these mean, we're already stuffed into that pigeonhole and expected obligingly to stay there. That's where traveling alone comes in. No one knows you, and you're a free bird. In one town, you can be as mean and nasty as you like, and in the next, as nice and obliging. You can experiment with 1,000 ways of life and learn the results for yourself. But travel with another person, and the whole thing is different. Make the slightest change of pigeonhole, and you're immediately accused of all sorts of heresies. So, most of us go through life being the way we are, not because that's the way we really want to be, but because that's the pigeonhole we're stuck in. But it's really our own fault if we stay there. And traveling alone is a good chance to make the switch. I thank my lucky stars for that free and wonderful journey. As they say, every boy must do his own growing up, no matter how tall his father. If you ask what single experience I remember most from this journey, without hesitation, it would be the night I fell off a bridge in Turkey. In those days, motorcycles were unknown in many parts of the world. When I stopped, I often drew crowds like a man from Mars. One morning, I passed through a remote little village called Sakshegwazu. It was soon the usual gathering, asking the usual questions. Who was I? Where did I come from? Where was I going? It's amazing how much can be said in a sign language with one's hands not in a black bag. A little American flag attached to the windshield quickly explained who I was, and the crude map I had procured in Constantinople showed me going toward Karayayitli, another village about 50 miles across the dusty plain. Karayayitli, they cried. No, no, don't go there. Robbers, cutthroats, thieves. They'll take everything you have. They'll murder you. All expressed with graphically unmistakable gesticulations. There was a familiar ring to their warnings. I'd heard similar stories so many times. Have you ever been there? I inquired, pointing in the general direction and making a motion of walking. No, no, they were emphatic. But we know. They pointed to their ears. We've heard all about it. There was a grim silence. A little crowd shook their collective head. You may remember the earlier picture of what I call that long walk across Turkey and the typical spill in the dust. Well, that day was just such a one, hanging tightly to the handlebars to keep from being thrown off at every moment. Just as it was getting dark, I came on a long stone bridge across a dried-up riverbed. A short distance beyond lay the little village. For a moment, the smooth, firm stones seemed a godsend. Without stopping, I could even let go of one handlebar and reach around the windshield to turn on the headlight. It took only an instant to duck down and do it, but that was enough. When I sat up to see what the headlight illuminated, there was nothing. A whole span of the bridge was missing. I flew off into the dark. When I awoke, there was a crowd of about 50 men, women, and children hovering over me, washing my wounds and bandaging my cut arm. They had carried not only me, but also the motorcycle to the little village. The conversation soon took the usual turn. Who was I? Where had I come from? Sakshegwazu, they cried, throwing their hands in the air. Allah be praised, you're still alive. All robbers, cutthroats, thieves in Sakshegwazu, expressed with the same terrifying gesticulations. And again, for the same reason. Had they ever been there? Allah forbid. But they knew. They had heard. This sad tale might be called the theme song of the journey, the then world's most international story. I guess I heard it in about every dialect of the sign language. Yet I'm happy to report that I never saw any evidence to support it. I traveled through a quarter of the countries of the world, everywhere from tribal Afghanistan to innermost China. over 40,000 miles for a year and a half. Everywhere, I was well treated. The golden rule may be the pronouncement of a few wise men, but it's just a beautiful verbalization of the collective subconscious. On my return to New York, my father made me a little speech. I had had a wonderful journey, afforded to few. It was now up to me to share it with others. But first things first. I may have thought I was alone on that motorcycle, but I was mistaken. Your poor mother was right there with you over every bump and stuck in every ditch. I think you should go and tell her how much you appreciate the ordeal you put her through. I hardly reached my mother before she informed me I would never know how hard that trip had been on my brave father. I wonder if there were not a picture of most of the fathers and mothers I saw all over the world. And so, Whitman, in 15 minutes, we have spent a year and a half and gone all the way around the world. You wonder what happened next? Lots of exciting things. The end of that motorcycle trip became a turning point in my life. My dreams of architecture took wings, but flew in other directions. Real wings took their place in such unlikely forms as flying automobiles and skyhook rescue systems. But that's for another time. The currents of life flow at levels, at speeds, and in directions that are infinite. Our lives are the record of the hope with which we spread our wings and the courage with which we fly toward our dreams. Have happy dreams. Until next time. Well, Whitman, last time we went traveling, it was on a motorcycle. And now look at us. You flying me around with a pair of wings. I'm too naughty to have my own, but you're still young enough to be an angel. At least sometimes. Let's see where life takes us this time. You see that airplane? Well, that's only a ghost plane now, but almost 50 years ago, it was as real as you and I. And my job was to go with it and its sister ships and take pictures of everything they did. In those days, it was as exciting as going into space in your day. We were building aerial bridges between countries that took longer to reach than now going to the moon. The dream was to build the world's first transocean airline from America to China. It not only required a new breed of flying boat with long legs and long wings to fly the long distances, but it also required the building of island stepping stones to make it possible. Being part of the team that did the job had the same excitement as flying from Florida to Cuba when I was a child. For my generation, this was the same kind of pioneering my grandfather had done when he went west in covered wagons and built stagecoach lines. Now, we were building airlines. Among the fun things I found out there were the Goonie birds. Actually, they're Laysan albatross, and were big, curious, and innocent enough to let human beings pick them up. But not so dumb they couldn't fly without navigational aids 2,000 miles across the Pacific Ocean twice a year to spend the winters in tropical luxury, dancing to their own love songs. But even those exciting days were only a beginning of the flying that was to come. With a name like Robert E Fulton Jr, I guess I couldn't escape at least trying to become an inventor. It now seems I have spent most of my adult life inventing. Things like gun air structures, amphibians, skyhooks, and even a new kind of book. Most of us tend to think of inventors as very original people. I wonder if they really are. The word invent comes from the Latin, invenire, to come into something. Actually, I wonder if we're not more discoverers than anything else. Edison, for example, didn't invent the materials with which he made the light bulb. He simply combined them. It was Edison himself who made that wonderful remark that invention is 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. Only after thousands of tests with thousands of different kinds of materials did he finally find the ones which combined to make the electric light practical. I remember the president of Harvard addressing our freshman class and telling us that in the 4 years that we were going to be there, they couldn't expect to teach us everything there was to know. They couldn't teach us all that if we were there 4 million years. But there was one thing they did want to teach us, and that was how to find out what we wanted to know. I also remember an artist friend coming to the house when your father and his brothers were very small. He asked if they would like to see him draw a horse with one line. "Gee, yes, Uncle Franz." Starting at the tip of one ear, he quickly produced a beautiful prancing steed. "Gee, Uncle Franz, how do you do that?" was their excited reaction. And Uncle Franz's answer was probably more exciting to me than it was to them. "It's easy, boys. First, you see the horse. Then, you draw a line around it." You don't understand that, but someday you will. From an inventor's point of view, there's only one thing missing in these two stories. From where he stands, the first thing he has to do is recognize a need. Better still, a necessity for the invention or the creation of whatever is needed. That's really how I became an inventor. World War II was already being fought in Europe. America could see it on the horizon. Hitler was terrifying the world with its dive bombers. Asia and Europe were already in the middle of the tremendous conflict. Roosevelt was calling for 50,000 pilots to man the U.S. Air Force. There simply were not enough planes and enough pilots to produce this many. And if ever there was a need, here it was. As a result, my cousin Chet Travis and I created a machine which we called the Aerostructor. It was strictly a primary flight trainer, simulating what a pilot sees as his airplane responds to his manipulation of its controls. It was an excellent trainer, but we were too young to realize that it was doomed to failure from the beginning. not for technical, but for purely human reasons. After all, every pilot knows that pilots are not just ordinary people. They are pilots. And what real He-Man pilot would be willing to admit that he was learning to fly sitting on the ground? How low can one sink or fly? The Aerostructure flew so low, it went right out of business. But that was only as a primary flight trainer. Its principle of operation was still valid. It just needed some rather complex additions to make it into a fixed gunnery trainer. Now that was a different matter, involving not just one's own daring as an aviator, but an enemy who shot you down if you didn't get him first. Learning how to do that was beyond the realm of pride. So the Gunnerstructure became a great success, the only machine of its kind in the world. It was officially credited with improving the scores of our fighter pilots by over 400%. The easiest way to tell you how it worked is with an actual airplane. Here's a P-51 Mustang fighter plane that was used in World War II and is ideal for explaining. Actually, it's my panache. Realize that the one reference sense paramount to a pilot is his sense of sight. His basic point of reference is the Earth's horizon. This is what the world looks like in a level flight. Now watch when we turn a little, or climb, or dive a little. But believe it or not, this is not what it seems like to the pilot. Where he sits, everything appears so stable that he gets the impression he is remaining still and the world is changing. Maybe Copernicus was wrong, and the Earth is the center of the universe, and man is the center of the Earth. There you have the whole principle behind the Aerostructure, and with the addition of a target plane flown by an instructor of the Gunnerstructure. But that little detail of the simulated target, along with the gun sight, is the secret to success in the training of aerial gunnery. You can't shoot at your own buddies. So in those days, they towed a big banner far behind a bomber and told you to fire at it. But hit or miss, the banner kept right on being towed. So how could you know when you were doing it right or wrong? Believe it or not, doing it on the ground is far superior. By using special systems of motion picture projectors, the Gunnerstructure provided a target flown by an experienced instructor, and the target flashed red whenever hit, an immediate indication of doing it right. Furthermore, with the throw of a switch, the instructor could freeze the entire operation in midair, help the student analyze what he was doing wrong, then go right back into action. But the machine itself was not all there was to it. Despite its historic glamour, gunnery of the fighter pilot turned out to be a very unscientific process. Not only was there no system for teaching it, worse still, there was no system to be taught. To accomplish their mission, as well as use the Gunnerstructure, required the creation of such a system. Thus, I found myself traveling all over the United States, teaching not the student pilots, but their instructors. And by the time the end of the war came, I felt that my who, where, when system was a far greater contribution to the war effort than the 500 Gunnerstructures I manufactured. Inventions have a way of spawning other inventions. During the war, I was given gas coupons and a waiver to fly my own airplane wherever the job required. But once on the ground, I needed wheels. And even taxis were limited in gas allotment. I don't know how many times I spent hours walking miles or waiting for lifts. I took to kicking the tires of my airplane, asking why it couldn't take me down the highway. After all, doesn't an airplane have all the components of an automobile? Both have wheels, an engine, controls, and seats. Then why can't the airplane travel down the highway? Obviously, the wings and the tail are too big, and the propeller is dangerous. That's simple. Just leave them behind. And so, magic presto, the amphibious ideal, and the four-wheeled amphibian. In less than 5 minutes, one person could convert it from one mode to the other. All the tools were built in, and the engine starter wouldn't work unless the job was done correctly. I was often asked if the wings could be taken off in the air. Of course they could. But if that's what you wanted to do, it would be much easier just to open the door and jump out. There were times when I guess some people thought I had. I remember landing at an Air Force base one day, converting from air to road operations, and trying to drive off the base. When the military guard at the gate asked for my identification, I showed him my driver's license. I mean, for your vehicle. Where's the card they gave you when you drove in? I explained that I didn't drive in, I flew in. You what, he said? Everybody else drives through this gate, and now you're gonna sit there and tell me you flew right over it? Well, you're gonna have to tell that to the colonel. An hour later, I finally got out. But my major problems were at a different sort of gate. No aircraft can be sold in the United States unless its design is approved by the government. The requirements for approval of normal airplanes were bad enough, but when it came to flying automobiles, the book had not yet been written, and the resulting certification expenses became exorbitant. During 4 years, I built and operated 8 amphibians, thousands of flying hours and road miles from coast to coast. I sometimes think the paperwork, end to end, would stretch that same distance. In order to finish the test program, I was obliged to sell control of the company. And by the time the certificate of approval was obtained, the first one ever issued by any government for a flying automobile, other people were dictating the company's policy, which I found so unacceptable that I bowed out. The only remaining amphibian is in the Smithsonian Aerospace Museum in Washington. I'm sorry I can't take you for a ride, Whitman, but in some of those pictures you saw the amphibian and your father when he was about your age. The sad end of it all reminded me of my mother, who, when things were difficult, would point out that kites rise against the wind. There certainly was plenty of wind. I was broke and disheartened. But if I could keep my kite string from breaking, something good might still come of it. I'd learned a lot more about aviation, and somehow one thing kept coming to mind. How often, flying across remote areas of this planet, had I asked myself, how would I ever get out of such a place if the engine quit and I went down here? With not just airplanes, but spaceships soon to circle the Earth, here it seemed was another need. Another horse to draw a line around and ride. A high, fast, and very exciting horse, to which I gave the name Skyhook. And perhaps I should have added Pegasus, since it's equally improbable. It's a little like parachuting, but without a parachute, and going backward, up, instead of down. How does it work? It's really very simple and very logical. Here's the ground. Here you are. An airplane comes along and drops the little parachute, a kit, which comes down here to you. In the kit, bag number 1, you find the harness, which is in a pair of overalls. You put that on, you inflate the balloon, which is attached to a helium bottle, in bag number 2, and you release it to carry the line up into the air, which is in bag number 3. The airplane, meanwhile, extends a fork on the nose and simply flies right straight and level right into the line. He locks on here, where he intercepts the line, and he goes out, let's say, this far. How much has the distance from here to here changed by the time you get out to there? If you take this as the center of the arc, it's only changed this much. Although you went from there to there with the airplane, you travel only this much, because the line can only pull, and you go in this direction. The airplane over here, and you're out here on the end of the line. The acceleration is very gentle, and you go up almost vertically. If you don't believe it, watch these fellows. Note the direction in which they go. The line can only pull, and since the balloon is up above, you go straight up. In fact, if there's a wind, you even go a little backward. Once the line is anchored to the nose of the plane, it swings up under the belly of the plane. The crew at the back catches it with a hook, transfers it to a winch, and in 3.5 minutes, you are aboard. The operation can take place at night, on land or sea, from woods or mountaintops, anywhere in the world. I've personally participated in a number of such rescues in regions as far away as the South Pacific and the North Pole, and believe me, it can sometimes be exciting. I should point out that Skyhook does not take the place of the helicopter, which is certainly an excellent means of rescue. The problem with a helicopter is its relatively short range of a few hundred miles, whereas an airplane like the Hercules C-130 can go 5,000 miles. Thus, the systems do not compete, but rather complement each other. Skyhook is a good example of the process of invention. We've already discussed the requirement for need, then the finding out of what you want to know, and the drawing of a line around what you see. As a general rule, the need can be expressed quite simply. Pick up someone with an airplane in flight without endangering the person or the aircraft. Determining the details, such as speed and range and height and human tolerances, is also fairly easy. Finding the simple solution to draw the line around, well, that's where the inspiration comes in. But then we arrive at the perspiration, preventing the solution from becoming too complicated. In my experience, ideas have to work themselves all the way around a circle. You start with your invention as a simple ideal, and you construct it in the simple fashion in which you dreamed it up. But your dream solution doesn't work. There are some problems. So you study it, and you think, well, if I change this, that would improve it. And it does improve it. But it doesn't eliminate everything. In fact, in many cases, it simply creates another problem. And thus, step by step, 2 steps forward and 1 step back, you go down perspiration road, often for a long time. until finally, miracle of miracles, the whole thing works. But it only just works. But at that point, you're only halfway around the circle. All those fixes that crept in may have made the idea work, but they also made an unbelievably complicated mess, which now has to be cleaned up. Fortunately, it usually turns out that later fixes often eliminate the need for earlier ones. And so things gradually simplify until at last you're back at the beginning with a workable, elegant solution. Every good invention has this element of elegance. But just to pep up the tour, the circle is almost always strewn with booby traps, pitfalls, delusions, snares, and failures. But don't get the idea you could or should eliminate them. Just like the pilot who never got lost is not yet a pilot. The process of inventing without failures is not invention. It's just doing the daily commonplace, the tried and true. Inventions are direct experiences with that historical element we talked about earlier, the relationship between cause and effect. Hidden down among the failures is often where the solutions lie. With Skyhook, for example, what at one point appeared to be a calamitous failure turned out months later to be the solution to making the whole system work. The road to success seems paved with failures, so be sure to enter them in your mental logbook. Here's a good idea of how ideas, good or bad, evolve from one another. What I call sea sled is a method of picking up a team of 20 frogmen at one time with a boat going at a high speed, as much as 50 miles an hour. The job used to be accomplished recovering one man at a time. It took a distance of a mile to get the whole team, and if the boat went too fast, it could pull a man's arm right out of its socket. By applying the vertical geometry of Skyhook to the horizontal plane of the water, 20 men are now recovered more easily, quickly, and safely than one was before. This solution was mostly a question of recognizing the need and applying a known concept in a new way. Inventors may be lone wolves when it comes to recognizing needs, necessities, but there's more to inventing than just the invention. Inventions are useful only when they relate to man or beast, in some way lighten his burdens or broaden his horizons. Thus, they have a life force of their own, which usually comes from the inner resources of the inventor. Some require only kitchen table workshops. Others, however, require million-dollar facilities. And in those cases, from somewhere outside, from some outer resource, must come what it takes to bring them to fruition. In a sense, the inventor provides a spark which sets off a whole series of reactions involving the cooperative effort of many. His ability to understand and function amid these human relations is vital to the success of his invention. I shall forever be grateful to men like Joseph Wilshire and Louis de Flores and Grover Loening, and also to men like Morty Cook and Ted Polhemus and Chet Travis and Dick Dexter and Franz Alvarez, who had enough faith in my faith to support me, and all the other men and women who over the years added their skills and devotion to the advancement of many projects. Despite the number of accusations against capitalist societies, the U.S. government deserves special mention for providing me with support for many years, support in of many kinds, technical, financial, inspirational. The Office of Naval Research is as interested in desert phenomenon as it is in interstellar navigation. And even the necessity for enormous bureaucracy has not been enough to stifle its humanitarian ideals, which are the basis of any good invention. The number of things waiting to be developed is so vast and in so many fields that there's little danger of inventors ever running out of work. Let me show you a few clips of what my life has become. Everything from wheelchairs to help handicapped persons fly aboard commercial airlines, to a new kind of book. To a light piano for the deaf. To experiments in the unlimited world of the arts. Come and help me roll this out, Whitman. Our name is now Sisyphus. And next time we'll see what adventures await us trying to climb that mountain we call life. We're only at the end of the beginning. Well, Whitman, last time we started chasing a ghost plane and ended with a skyhook. Before that, we went around the world on a motorcycle and to the North Pole. In 60 minutes, you did all it took me 76 years to accomplish. But those 76 years have given me one advantage: the opportunity to think about it all and try to put the pieces together. No one can wander even the tiniest corner of this universe very long without developing some sort of personal philosophy. That may sound like a big word to you, but it's very small compared to its meaning. It means the search for truth, for the meaning of our lives. And the right to that search is a very private possession, which no one can ever take away from us, because it exists only in our minds and hearts. When we complain that we're not the boss, it's a trivial complaint because it refers to our job or our physical possessions or our comfort. Each of us is the boss of his own thoughts and feelings. These are the results of his philosophy and his search. To a large extent, the joy we get out of life depends upon how well we accomplish that search, the conclusions we reach. One might say heaven and hell are only an idea apart. Look for a moment at this big globe we've been working on. Here it is hanging by a thread. And what does it say? Heaven, hell, heaven, hell. No matter how we read it. It's a question of how we turn it, of how we choose to read it. Since you helped me make it, Whitman, I give it to you to practice turning to read the way you want it to. That's up to you. And now it's yours. Meanwhile, it may help you make some choices by seeing what your old grandfather is now doing, which is the best way of describing what he now believes. I'm ashamed to admit how many years, miles, and flight hours it's taken me to learn to see just a few basics. Life seems to have secret systems of being illusory. It's all something like the gunner structure we went flying in. Remember? When we made a turn in the airplane, it looked like the whole world was tipping. But in reality, it was only the airplane that tipped. Especially a pilot can easily see the world as an illusion. And I've been a pilot for nearly 50 years. Yet illusions can turn into incredible realities. For years, my work involved extending the boundaries of aviation with the likes of flying automobiles and Skyhook air rescue systems, things people don't normally believe when you tell them. So I found documentary photography, seeing it, and I thought showing it like it is, a great help. During years of flying, I took thousands of pictures from the air. One evening, a visitor to my studio saw this one of a dried lake in a valley near Santa Barbara, California. "I lived in Santa Barbara for years," he exclaimed. "I know that lake. Do you realize some of the finest racehorses in the world are bred and trained in that valley?" I soon began to discover innumerable connections between abstract images on the surface and what lay within them. Put into photography, it was Emerson's statement that what you are speaks to me so loudly I cannot hear what you say. Aerial pictures of mountains showed mountaineers and goats. In the forests were fawns. In the deserts, dromedaries. There were Egyptian hieroglyphics and bas-reliefs chiseled in the plains by farmers' plows. An incredible array of forms that tell stories about the people who made them. Most of them, I'm sure, are totally unaware of their artistry, but their frequently unconscious philosophies of life are revealed by their actions. Every time I fly, it looks like an exciting new view from Mount Olympus, which I also find fortuitous due to a long-standing interest in mythology. Carl Jung describes mythologies as an expression of the collective unconscious. In story form, they show man with all his hopes and fears and failings, but also with his courage, his belief in the eventual triumph of justice, the importance of nothing in excess, and the great joy of beauty. The myths of Perseus and Medusa, of Orpheus and Eurydice, of Theseus and the Minotaur, of Daedalus and Icarus, describe modern man as well as they did his ancestors of 4,000 years ago. They show us our deeper selves. I not only enjoy translating them into photographic form, but even find myself making up my own mythological situations. Here we have each of us, man and woman alike, on this strange and wonderful thing we call planet Earth, each pretending to face the world alone, to be macho. Stand back, everyone. Here I come, and I don't need anyone. But in reality, each wearing a mask, each with one hand out behind, and each whispering, anyone there? Anyone there? Hoping someone will touch their finger and say, yes, I'm here, and I love you. Even though they often have medieval or modern settings, what I like to call my magic door, or magic forest, or magic mountain, or magic window pictures, have mythological implications for me. They help brighten my life with their depiction of looking from dark into light, of drawing back the curtains and looking out on the potentials of each day. They give me a feeling of hope. The best of life seems to lie somewhere in the middle of its extremes, of its darks and lights, and photography seems a wonderful media in which to express this condition. I now have such a large collection of pictures that has triggered, of all things, a new kind of book. My studio is full of books of beautiful pictures by great artists, so many I rarely have time to enjoy them. The pictures are meant to be seen, but are really buried in paper caves, rarely see the light of day, because books are hard to frame and too valuable to cut up. Something's wrong with the whole concept. I guess once an inventor, always an inventor. Having long ago discovered there's more to an invention than just an ideal, that closing what I previously described as the inventor's circle requires actively getting into the process, I acquired a printing press. But the press requires plates from which the printing is done. And the plates require an etching process to dictate where the ink should go. And the etching process requires a camera to expose the image onto the plate. And the camera requires the original work that's to be reproduced. And then there are the questions of paper and ink and covers and binders and boxes and labels and frames and sizes and shapes and textures and tools for making all these materials do what I want them to. Out of all this came what I call my Librex books, which the United States Patent Office says is one of the major improvements in art books in 100 years. It's so simple, it hardly needs an explanation. Just watch. Box, book, removable binding, picture, frame, thumbtack, all in one package. After flying automobiles and skyhooks, books that come apart may not seem very dramatic, but in their quiet way they can bring far greater pleasure to many more millions. That great literary genius, Thomas Carlyle, pointed out that books are by far the most momentous, wonderful, and worthy of man's inventions. So I am emboldened even to do another book, Winds of Life, which incidentally brought about another little invention. The subject of this book is essentially my personal philosophy, which I felt required equally personal lettering. So I designed my own typeface and system for hand setting it with individual letters, held on a metal frame by little magnets bought at the local hardware store. With a simple copy machine, I made a so-called dummy layout, combining the verbal copy with the sketches and photographs. Now, it's all ready for the plate making and the printing press. It's a handy creative technique any would-be author like myself can use to give one's masterpiece to the world. Somewhere deep within each of us, there's a hidden self, so well hidden that frequently life is gone before we find it. Instinct cunningly protects it with an infinite variety of devices: egos, material possessions, customs, costumes, philosophies, pure opinions, shields of every description. Most of us would probably never get to know more than our superficial selves if it were not for the winds of life. Often, they appear to be senseless, relentless forces which play with us as pawns, blow us helter-skelter across the boards, sweep us to the edge of the precipice, but all the while are giving our other and perhaps wiser self a chance to escape that dark and secret hiding place and share a life in the sun. Often, the most meaningful of such winds come in the middle of our greatest pleasures. In my case, just an engine throb away from disaster, flying. Literally riding on the wind itself, remote, alone, where thoughts are unfettered and one sees weird and wonderful sights that are unrecognizable when standing on them. Sometimes thundering at 300 or 400 miles an hour through towering, tossing walls of clouds, with ethereal electronic voices guiding me to my destination. Often at night, under infinite oceans of rippling stars, or blustering blizzards of snowflakes streaking past my spellbound eyes into the eternal past, to remind me that I am traveling at similar speed in the opposite direction. Such are the often frightening winds that have done much to introduce me to my other self. He is the true author of this book, and to be sure I don't forget it, his signature appears on almost every page. Through the years, his hidden self and I have come face to face over many of the questions which in the daily course of events we put off for later attention. At my present age of 76, I don't know how old he is, later means now. So I've set things down as he's dictated. The words sometimes rhyme because he says existence has a poetic rhythm. Sunrise, sunset, winter, summer, youth, age, tides, low and high. We're not just drops in the rhythmic ocean, we are the ocean. The photographs are further examples of these somewhat mythic experiences. Many were taken in flight, yet clearly tell us forgotten tales of long, long ago. The little one-line sketches attempt to catch some of this pristine quality. Together, he and I sometimes feel like the Chinese sage, who sleeping dreamed he was imagining, and awake imagined he was dreaming, until finally he didn't know whether he was awake or asleep. Where we are in life doesn't seem to bring us as much pleasure as where we're going. But only after traveling much of the world have I discovered it is possible to go a long, long way without moving at all, by means of such creativity. Life is infinitely bigger than we are, and regardless of social or economic conditions, using the wonderful tool of our imagination provides each of us with the exciting opportunity to explore life's magic, to order its elements, to fathom its lights and darks, to wonder at its mystery, and to try and express our resulting visions. I seem to have an insatiable motivation to create. Each time I experience beauty, it inspires me to try to create something beautiful in as many forms as possible. Sculptures, jewelry, architecture, photography, even mechanical designing, machining, welding, writing. The joy of creating comes not from recognition by others, but from the process itself. The voyage through the outer world of action into our inner world of thoughts and emotions, into that personal universe that's all our own. It doesn't need any bargain airfare to get there, just an imaginative passport we can issue to ourselves. And by giving the results away, I find it provides one kind of cake we can have and eat it too. It's called happiness. Learning how to think happy, work happy, share happy, be happy is a tough exercise, but it brings its own reward. I sometimes think I've become a dillypreneur, a cross between a dilettante and an entrepreneur, sort of a patron of the arts, supporting a would-be artist, myself. The results, I admit, are very varied, large and small in various materials, and often perhaps puzzling, like this one, growing with a tree, a symbolic expression of gratitude to nature, an appreciation for her beauty, and providing her with yet another alphabet with which she can express herself. One of the many paradoxes in my life is whether I do what I like or I like what I do. They're so interwoven, I can't tell them apart. I guess my real problem is time, where to find enough. The story of each of our lives is a record of what we do with our time. Actually, time, a certain number of days and years to be on this earth, is about the only thing I feel really belongs to each of us. Most things we think of as ours, our house, car, airplane, TV, even our pets, are really just the opposite. They end by owning us. They make continuous demands on our time, spending it as their own, often bankrupting our time bank. There seem to be three kinds of time. Physical time, a man on a tightrope, confined by a clock and a calendar, able to move only forward or backward, or fall. Mental time, a man in a boat on an infinite ocean, moving in any direction, but only on one level plane. And finally, spiritual time, a bird able to fly in all directions and levels, a free spirit in a limitless universe, the realm of the abstract. Somehow, I think meditation is an effort to integrate these three by talking to our best selves. Such conversations have shown me how fortunate I am to have had my own airplane, to fly in any direction for so many years, have led me to realize how difficult it is for those who are in wheelchairs to enjoy the advantages of air travel. The aisles in airliners are too narrow, the lavatories too small, and the steps up to the airplane are impassable for their chairs. From an inventor's point of view, here is a need of needs, and here, hopefully, a solution. An air chair with a built-in but almost invisible lavatory. Hopefully, it may simplify air travel for many. Another project which has proved interestingly unique is my light piano. Normal pianos make strings vibrate and become audible, but not for the deaf. Since colored lights are also vibrations of individual frequencies, why not a light piano for deaf persons? Of course, it can't be the same, but it can add another dimension for many who can't hear. This is part of a little light music act put on by deaf children. It proved a great success. In reality, are not most of us handicapped in one way or another? How much of the potential of life do we achieve? How much is our vision limited by the blinders of things? And even of that which we look at, how much do we see? I've spent more than 20,000 hours looking down from airplanes, but I now feel it's more important to look up. Looking up, the sky is the limit. Looking down, it seems for most of us to be just our feet. To encourage myself to look up, I've taken to making flags and fountains, eye-catching, free-floating in the wind. This is my tomorrow flag. I fly it today because tomorrow never comes. This is my fly away troubles flag. And here's a solar energy flag. And a flag of peace, a pleasure to dream up and make. And when there's no wind to wave my flags, I turn on what I call my water wings, which dance by day or dark, joyously feathering the sky and drawing my imagination into the wondrous unknown beyond. And so, Whitman, hopefully looking up, we come to another milestone. In an hour and a half, we have made a journey as old as time, because you and I are a result of all that has come before us, and as young as the future, because it will be better or worse because of each of us. In replaying my 76 years, I realize how lucky I've been. So I made this little film to share my good fortune with you, and if possible, with your brothers and sisters of all races and creeds, and perhaps to motivate all of us to remember that when we consider the incredible universe which has been put before us, if we can't find a way to be pleased with it, how can we expect its creator to be pleased with us? When I was a child, the railroad was the fastest transport on Earth, and there wasn't any radio. Today, with a spacecraft orbiting the solar system at speeds that nullify gravity, and your television employing them as mere relay stations, it is easy to get the impression that everything has changed, but it hasn't. The fundamental principles of integrity, of work, and of respect for others, and the world we live in are still the same. Only the rate at which we interrelate has vastly increased. Even flying automobiles and skyhooks are only tiny steps along the long road to life's self-realization achieved through each of us. Perhaps I've led you astray by calling all this a one-man caravan. Actually, my life has been, as yours will be, the integration of many lives, the sharing and passing on from one to another of ideas and knowledge and skills and tools. And remember well that most things are just tools. The universe is full of winds, solar winds, stellar winds, the winds of love, the winds of war, the winds our hopes and hearts fly on, and the winds that sometimes would dash us to pieces. All these are the winds of life. There's no denying them, but how we ride them is up to each of us. That's the one-man caravan part of it. It's not a question of how much better or worse we do it than the next fellow, but of how well we do it with the wings we have and the winds that blow our way. Both are given us for reasons we don't yet understand. But our success in flying them depends upon our faith, our will, our courage, and our enthusiasm. We can learn to soar to great heights, or we can pull out our feathers because we're afraid to try. As you can see, your kite too rises against the wind, and frequently the strongest winds are within ourselves. Keep a pair of practical feet on the ground, but keep wonder in your eyes, love in your touch, gentleness in your speech, joy in your thoughts, laughter on your lips, and above all, faith in life. I wish you good winds, Whitman. Good winds, good works, a life full of wisdom and wonder.